The coffee in the break room was still warm. I remember standing there trying to convince myself I'd made it earlier and simply forgotten. But I hadn't even taken my first break yet. And I was the only person working that night. Security locked the building at midnight. So whoever used the break room was still inside. At the time, I'd been working nights for about 3 months. I handled data reconciliation for a logistics company, nothing dramatic. Spreadsheets, invoices, timestamps. I compared shipping manifests to internal logs and flagged inconsistencies. It was repetitive but quiet, and quiet was what I needed then. My apartment was small, my social circle even smaller. Nights suited me. Fewer people. Fewer interruptions. That was before I started noticing the break room lights turning on when I hadn't gone anywhere near it. I liked knowing exactly how many people were in the building. On night shifts, that number was usually 1. Me. Our office occupied the 5th floor of a 10-story building downtown. During the day, it felt cramped and loud. At night, it turned into something else entirely. Long hallways with motion sensor lights. Cubicles arranged like a grid of empty rooms. Glass conference spaces reflecting shadows that weren't there. The break room sat at the end of the corridor near the emergency stairwell. It was the only place with a window that overlooked the street. From there, I could see the red glow of traffic lights cycling through empty intersections. That night, I threw the cup away. I washed my hands longer than usual. Not because they were dirty. Just to do something. When I walked back to my desk, I told myself I'd probably left the break room light on earlier and forgotten about it. Maybe I'd even brewed coffee absent-mindedly and didn't remember. Fatigue does strange things. I finished my shift without thinking about it again. Until the next night. It was the microwave that time. I hadn't planned to go to the break room. Around 1:45 a.m. I heard the faint, rhythmic hum of it running. At first, I assumed it was part of the building's background noise. Air ducts sometimes carried sound in misleading ways. But when it didn't stop, I muted my headphones and listened carefully. 3 minutes. Then a beep. Silence. Then another beep. That was the sound our microwave made when it finished and no one opened the door. I sat there for a full minute, trying to convince myself it was something else. Maybe the cleaning crew had left it in some odd mode earlier in the evening. Maybe it had a malfunction. I stood up slowly and walked down the hallway. The motion lights flicked on one by one as I passed. Each click of illumination felt deliberate. The break room door was slightly ajar. Inside, the microwave display read midnight. The interior light was on. The glass plate inside was still turning lazily, as if it hadn't fully stopped. There was no food inside. No container. No smell. Just warmth radiating faintly from the metal walls. I opened the door. It clicked shut with a soft mechanical sound. No one was there. I checked the hallway again. The emergency stairwell door was closed. The security latch still sealed. The main office area was empty. I walked back to my desk faster than I meant to. That night, I told myself the microwave must have been left running before midnight. Maybe someone had reheated something and walked away. Maybe it had glitched and restarted. Every explanation felt thin. But I kept them anyway. By that point, I had already stopped wondering if someone else was working late. I had started wondering why I never heard anyone leave. The third night was when it stopped being easy to dismiss. I hadn't gone to the break room at all. I decided I would avoid it entirely. If I didn't look, there would be nothing to notice. Around 3 a.m., my computer screen dimmed unexpectedly. Not a shutdown, just a brief flicker, like the power had dipped for a split second. I looked up. The overhead lights in the office remained steady. Then I heard it. A chair scraping against tile. Not carpet. Tile. The break room had tile floors. I didn't move right away. My body reacted before my thoughts did, heart tightening, breath shallowing. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. Just the unmistakable sound of furniture shifting. Then silence. I told myself it could have been the building settling. Old structures made sounds. Temperature changes caused expansion. I'd read about that. But buildings didn't drag chairs. I stood and walked halfway down the corridor before stopping. I didn't want to be seen approaching if someone was there. Seen. That word felt wrong. Seen by who? Security would have called me if someone badged into our floor. The building required keycard access after midnight. There were cameras in the elevators and at the stairwell exits. I turned the corner slowly. The break room light was on. The door was closed this time. That was new. I hadn't been down there all night. I approached carefully and listened. Nothing. I reached for the handle and paused. If someone was inside, what would I say? I was the one who didn't belong there at that hour, technically. Everyone else had gone home hours ago. I was the anomaly in the building's rhythm. I opened the door. The room was empty. But one of the chairs at the table had been pulled out. Not slightly. Fully. Facing the window. The coffee machine display blinked 12 o'clock, as if it had lost power and reset. I felt something then, not fear exactly. Something colder. The sense that I was moving through a space that had been occupied moments before. I stepped back into the hallway and looked toward the stairwell door. Still closed. Still silent. That was the first time I checked the entire floor. I walked through every conference room. Every cubicle. I opened storage closets I'd never opened before. I even checked the men's restroom, though no one ever used it at night. No one was there. But the break room light stayed on behind me. By the end of that week, I had started arriving earlier than scheduled. Not because I wanted to. Because I wanted to see if anyone else was staying late. I watched the elevators from the lobby one evening before my shift started. I watched the cleaning crew leave. I watched the security guard log his patrols. No one else went up after midnight. No one came down. On Friday, I did something I hadn't done before. I left my desk quietly and turned off the break room light around 1 a.m., then closed the door. I didn't go back there for hours. At 3:27 a.m., I walked down the hallway again. The light was on. The door was open. And I could smell coffee. Fresh coffee. I didn't rush this time. I stood in the hallway and listened carefully. There was a faint sound inside. Not movement. Breathing. Slow. Measured. As if someone was sitting very still. My mind refused to process it at first. I told myself it was the air vent. The refrigerator. The building's hum combining in some strange way. But it didn't fade. It didn't fluctuate. It remained steady. I took one step forward. The breathing stopped. Immediately. The silence afterward felt deliberate. I don't remember making the decision to run. I just remember being back at my desk, heart pounding so loudly it felt external. I didn't check again. I stayed at my desk until sunrise. The following Monday, I spoke to security. I kept it casual. I asked if there had been any after-hours maintenance scheduled. If anyone else had access to our floor overnight. The guard looked at his logs. No entries. No badge swipes. No scheduled work. He asked why. I told him I'd heard some noises. Probably plumbing. He nodded like he'd heard it before. Old building, he said. That explanation started to feel rehearsed. The final night I worked there, I didn't plan on quitting. I hadn't told anyone about the breathing. About the chair. About the coffee. I convinced myself I was tired. Overstimulated by silence. Creating patterns where none existed. That night, I decided I would confront it. At 2 a.m. I turned off every light in the office except the break room. I sat in the darkness at my desk and waited. If someone was using it, I would see them leave. Minutes passed. Then an hour. The break room light stayed on. At 3:12 a.m., the microwave beeped. Once. Then again. I stood slowly. The hallway was darker than usual, only illuminated by the light spilling from the break room doorway. The door was open. The chair was pulled out again. Facing the window. And on the table was a paper cup. Steam rising gently from the lid. I didn't enter. I didn't need to. Because on the wall near the coffee machine, mounted above the sink, was a small convex mirror, the kind that let you see blind spots. From where I stood in the hallway, I could see the reflection inside the room. The chair wasn't empty. There was an indentation in the seat. And something dark resting against the backrest. Not a shape. Not a body. Just a distortion, like the air was thicker there. As I stared at it, the reflection shifted. Very slightly. As if adjusting. And then I heard it again. Breathing. Not from the room. From directly behind me. I didn't turn around. I don't know why. I think part of me knew that whatever was reflected in that mirror wasn't confined to the break room. I stepped sideways instead, breaking the line of sight. The breathing stopped. When I looked back at the mirror, the chair was empty. The steam from the cup was fading. I walked backward down the hallway until I felt the wall behind me. Then I turned and left. I didn't clock out. I didn't tell anyone. I left my badge on my desk and took the stairs down 5 flights without looking back. I got an email 2 days later asking if I intended to resign. I replied yes. They didn't ask for a reason. A month passed. I avoided that part of downtown entirely. One afternoon, I met a former coworker for coffee. Daytime. Busy street. Normal noise. He asked why I'd left so suddenly. I told him nights weren't for me. He laughed and said they'd stopped offering overnight shifts. I asked why. He shrugged. Apparently, after I left, the break room lights had started turning on during the day. Even when the floor was full. People said they smelled coffee brewing when the machine was unplugged. Facilities replaced the microwave twice. It kept running on its own. He said management eventually locked the break room after hours. Then during business hours. Then permanently. For a while, I convinced myself it had only belonged to that building. That whatever I heard stayed there after I left. I believed that right up until the first night I woke up in my apartment, smelling fresh coffee. I didn't tell him about the breathing. Or the mirror. Or the way it stopped the moment I moved. I didn't tell him that sometimes, late at night in my apartment, when everything is quiet and the refrigerator hums just right, I still hear it. Slow. Measured. Waiting. And sometimes I wake up certain someone else already made it.